unless you do research on your own, these are the kind of things that people don't really tell you about water and the reasons why we're having the issues that we're having in the city of Detroit with water shutoffs and such. So I'm going to start somewhere where people normally wouldn't think you would start, and I'm starting with Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. This is not something that everyone learns about typically, but in this instance, when it comes to housing and water and transportation and things of this nature, we first and foremost are stuck in our physical realm of needing air, water, food, rest, health, and shelter. And a lot of people just take these things for granted, but the truth is, if you don't have these things fulfilled, then it's hard for you to feel safe and stable. And of course, that factors into being loved and included and belonging. So these are like things that we're moving up, and you're not able to achieve these things at the top if you're not coming to homeostasis, which essentially is a feeling of security and stability, and having all these things fulfilled, knowing for sure that you can have these things. And our society has a tendency of keeping people in survival mode exactly because it allows them to control us. And this is an easy way of seeing how it allows them to control us. Because if we don't have these things that we need up here, then we don't have the time or the energy or the money or the resources to be able to fight the system at higher levels or fulfill our own other human needs that we have. Water as a human right, it is not written in our Constitution specifically that water is a human right, but water is a human right, just as the air we breathe is a human right. And one of the biggest things I think that we as human beings have left to do in our society is to declare water a constitutional right. If it's something that you can't live without, if it's something that CPS would pull my kids out of the house for, then why is it not considered a human right? It's very clearly a human right. Everybody in concentration camps down by the border are being rationed water by our government right now for free, because if they didn't have the things they need, they would all die. That right there, our government's proving in and of itself that it is a human right. You can't deny it. It should be written into our Constitution. And as long as they're denying people water, and as long as people are accepting that denial of water, whatever you're accepting, you're declaring acceptable. So it's really important that we are revolutionary and that we are pushing the limits, and not all the things that are legal are right, and not all the things that are illegal are wrong to do. Just a basic background on me: I took over a house in 2013. I did give a little rundown earlier of how I obtained the house. But when I came into the house, there was water running across the floor, and that was one of the reasons why I picked the house that I did, is because the water was already on. At that point in time, there were people who were getting arrested. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Hammerich 9. At the time, I had to stay silent on what I was doing for my children, because for me to be in that fight at the time and expose myself would have endangered my children, because I did have free water for 3 years, and I could have been prosecuted for it. But I would do it all over again, because I had to take care of my babies. So I'm going to start out after the hierarchy of needs with water being a human right. And we all know that water is necessary, first of all, for drinking, second of all, for bathing. We need to wash dishes, we need to be able to cook, we need to be able to clean. So there's a lot of aspects of our lives that revolve around water, and the people that have it and have never been without it don't understand the domino effect that is created when someone is denied the right to water. The fact that we live in the Great Lakes state and people are having mass shutoffs and things like Nestle bottling water for $200 a year, while Flint can't even get clean water and still has to pay the highest price of all for poison water that they can't even use, is egregious, and the fact that it hasn't been remedied is egregious. At the same time, we need to be mindful of how we are empowering ourselves. because there is a famous saying by Assata Shakur, and she basically says that no one in history has ever gotten what they wanted by appealing to the moral conscience of the oppressor, which means you can beg and you can supplicate and you can ask all you want to, but that doesn't mean that they're going to give you what you want. And there's a time that comes when you need to take what you need, and that is protected under exigent circumstances, which I'm going to cover in a few minutes. So water being a human right, they don't want this to go into court, because if it's proven in a court of law, then no one can be charged for water, and they would have to basically essentially free the water, which is what we're trying to do. And so when the Hammerich Nine were arrested, they basically threw the trial out the window, because there was no way that they could go into court and be able to prove that what they were doing was wrong. And in essence, if they would have taken that to trial, the civil human rights of the people involved, and of course the citizens of the city of Detroit, would have been proven that what they did was fair and what they did was right. How we can and should prove it? Bless you. Why should we prove this? That reason's obvious. How can we prove it? Like I said, there's different ways. The best way is by pushing in revolutionary ways that most people are not willing to do. They shut your water off, you turn it back on. Rainwater collection, opening up a fire hydrant, tapping water wherever you can find it. Say there's an abandon next door and somebody pulled the brass parts out and that water is flowing. These are the kind of things that we need to be ready and willing to do to get water in order to keep it as a human, in order to push that forward. The composition of water. This is something that a lot of people don't talk about. Water carries a vibrational frequency of its own, but it is also a receptive element, which means that when you put your energy into it by talking, by acting, by thinking, that your literal energy is being impressed upon the water. And I know this is kind of a strange thing to fathom, but there is a scientist, he's now deceased, his name is Masaru Emoto, and you can Google him. He essentially did these experiments with water where he took, I think it's called electron field microscope, and he had certain water that was contaminated and they just froze it and they took pictures of it, and then they would pray over the water, or they would take regular tap water and they would pray over the water or say certain things to it. They'd have like whole classrooms of children coming through and saying things to the water, and then they would freeze it and it would make these beautiful patterns, all which were unique and all which showed the fact that the water is picking up that energy. So water in our bodies, essentially, we are electrical beings. Our whole nervous system, our brain, our spine, all of this is electric. And we depend on water, and we have like this electricity, water system. And the system that we have in our body is reflected by the system of water on the earth. There's the flowing through, there's filtration, it's all microcosmic and macrocosmic. So water, when you think about the fact that it has and can carry vibration, our bodies are made from anywhere from 70 to 85% water. More when we're little, and then that decreases as we age. So the biggest question is, if our bodies are made up of water, and water is a receptive element, and we are thinking, feeling beings, then the water in our bodies is being influenced by us as we're carrying it in our bodies. And then when we deposit it back into the sewer system, or whatever that looks like, it goes out into the world. And all of the water that we drink and all of the water that's on the earth has been recycled for thousands and millions of years. So the same water that was around when the dinosaurs existed is the same water that you and I are drinking today, and the same water that, however you want to believe Jesus drank, and all so on and so forth. So it's really important to understand that not only do you have an effect on yourself by influencing water, but you have an effect on other people, and you can have an effect on the world. And you don't normally think of it in this way, but when you send out influence, it will go further. The ripples will go further than you ever think that they could. And this also is something that you can study, because there is like a body of water in Japan that was incredibly polluted. They had a bunch of monks and different people surrounding the lake and praying over it, and they literally had tested the water before and they tested the water after, and the lake was clearing up. So just think about the different ways that we could do this and influence this. We can influence the rain as it's coming down. We can influence the water in our bodies. We can influence other people. And they don't want you to know this, but our words and our thoughts have more power than we think. We not only are electrical beings, but we have a frequency that's going out from us at all times, and that actually can be scientifically measured. And the fact that we have that frequency going out, if we can control our thoughts and focus and be strategic in the things that we're doing, we can have much more influence than anybody really could imagine. So that's a big reason to respect water. It is beyond me how, for centuries, people have crapped in the water. Why would you purposely dirty up water and then throw a bunch of chemicals in it and whatever else you want to, and then you're like, why isn't the water clean? Why do we have issues with it? Which I'm going to say one word about this form of housing that I'd like to build. It's called an earthship, and you can Google that online. It is a form of self-sustainable housing, and it uses solar panels, wind turbines, rainwater collection, composting toilets. They include fisheries, full indoor gardens. It's a self-sustaining system. So DTE shows up, they can't shut your electric off. The water company shows up, they can fuck off too. You might have to pay your taxes, or if you don't have the income, you could apply for a poverty exemption. But so my goal is to build an earthship in the city of Detroit. It's a huge project. I am going to have to purchase land because I can't obtain it the backwards way like I did with my house, because people are not willing to invest that kind of manpower and hours into a project that they don't know is owned as far as the land initially. But water in and of itself, the reason why we should respect water is because even though it is 70% of the earth, there is only so much of it left, and our Great Lakes is basically the last largest freshwater source on earth. So the poisoning that's going on in the Great Lakes right now is very important, and that's why you hear a lot about it in the news and stuff. Our lakes come down from Superior, which is fed by natural springs, and then all of that ends up traveling to the ocean. So when we're talking about respect for water, we're talking about respect for the whole cycle. And so that might mean some changes for us in the way that we do things, the way that we've been taught to do things, because we were brought into the system of dependency, and then our dependency that was created by someone else is then exploited. And so it's really important for us to get out of that cycle and to empower ourselves, because the only way that we can empower others is by empowering ourselves. So accessing water. Accessing water, to me, is one of the most revolutionary things I'll ever do in my life. And I'm willing to die for water. Just like people blocked the Homrich trucks, I want to follow the Homrich trucks and just turn the water back on, after they've already shut everybody's stuff off. Or open up a hydrant. There's a lot of different ways that we can be rebellious in the system, and that's where exigent circumstances comes in again in a minute. Accessing water, bam, is by any means necessary. This is something we need to live. We need to be willing to do whatever it takes to access that. And we want to think about harvesting. We can do rainwater collection with barrels. We can tap into water that's already existing, like I said, with an abandoned house, whatever means that we have besides that, to access it for free, or to basically put others in a position where they have to force us to we have to force them to give us water. The rainwater collection, which is important, and running a well. If you're out in the middle of nowhere and you have the equipment that you need, you can tap a well almost anywhere. You have to know where the basic sources of water are. You can actually buy a kit that will allow you to create a well, and that's an important thing to know if there is ever a martial law, or if there's a lot of people moving around because there's lack of water or lack of fresh water. It's important to know these kind of things. Also to know where natural springs are. Natural springs, especially hot springs, if you have a testing kit, or if you don't, because a lot of the hot springs have sulfur in them. Hot springs comes from deep in the earth, and a lot of times it's already been filtered in the way that's necessary, and also has minerals and stuff that not only can lift your mood, but also have healing properties, which is why people will go to natural springs all over. So one of the things that you can do to prepare in an emergency situation is to look up where are the different springs in your area, or if you have an evacuation plan, if there is an emergency and you're going to another place or state, where are the springs located there? And you also want to know where the springs are too, because if they're messing around with the lakes and there's a nuclear accident, or they're pouring so much stuff in there that it's not drinkable anymore, spring water is still a fresh source that's coming straight out of the earth and can still be accessed, and it's not something that is widely known. Okay, so finding water in emergencies, natural springs, harvesting tools. I talked about the ability to tap water with like a kit that you can buy, and these are things that you can look up. Water shutoffs and billing. A lot of places in the United States have forbidden people to collect rainwater. Rainwater falls from the sky everywhere on earth. There is no way and no reason why anybody should be trying to tell any of us that we cannot collect rainwater. Not only is water a human right, but we can open our mouth up to the sky and we can drink it straight from the sky. So in the city of Detroit, in regards to water shutoffs, they have hiked up the price of water significantly. And one of the reasons is because they are billing us for drainage. And if we are paying for drainage, if we are paying for the water that is hitting our land, then we can harvest the water that is hitting our land, because we have already paid for it. Yeah. And this is something that I really think needs to be proven in a court of law, but it stands to reason. It's a very logical thing. If you've already paid for it, obviously it's yours. So these are important things. If I lived in the city of Flint, no offense to Flint residents, because they are looking for remedy. But like I said, you can appeal to the powers that be all you want to. If they had been harvesting and collecting rainwater, I think if I was a Flint resident, that would be immediately what I would start doing. What I would do. I would harvest it off my roof. I would harvest it in my grass. Lay down some painter's plastic, like whatever you got to do, because you have to take this into your own hands. And as long as you're appealing to the state, it's helplessness and it's despair, and obviously people are getting poisoned and dying, and there's no need for this to continue. No H2O, but live in the Great Lakes, and how to free the water. I've already covered a couple of these things. Opening up fire hydrants. I would suggest things as radical as harvesting water, which has been done from the mayor's mansion. Harvesting water from, which also has been done earlier in the year, in Campus Martius, where the fountain is. The queue line was shut down, and we took water from the fountain to make a statement that you can't take our water away, and we will take it however we need to take it. So exigent circumstances. Exigent circumstances basically says you are impeding on my right to life, and if I don't do this right now, I'm gonna die. And this is something that is provable in court. This is the way that I got my house with 4 kids living in my van, and we almost froze to death when I went into a house, and I now own the house. I went into it, I did not apologize for it, I never will, I'll never feel bad about it, did what I had to do for my kids, and I fully expect anybody who's brave enough and willing enough to do the same thing, and they'll get the same result. You just have to push hard enough, and you can never ever apologize for what you're doing. Exigent circumstances is essentially, if I didn't do this, then I would have died. And that's the example that I've given. Another example is people who are dehydrated. If you, in a court of law, can prove that by them not giving you water, you were dehydrated enough to the point where you could have died, then that is grounds for a lawsuit. And it's also grounds for getting, being able to have charges dropped that are put upon you when you take the water that you need. Sources of free water. These are getting less and less available. There's less drinking fountains. There are less places that just give away water for free. Everybody's trying to, water is essentially the new gold. And that is why the Great Lakes has been targeted, because corporate interests want control of the water now because of things like California droughts and nuclear power plant issues and pollution from fracking, and which is, like I said, another reason why we need to respect our water. So this is the hot spot. This is the spot. This is the place to be. And a few years, I would say about 5 or 6 years ago, I basically, as soon as I heard that the Great Lakes Water Authority was being established, I said, this is what they're going to do. They're going to take control of the water now, and they're going to turn it into such a commodity that it's going to be literally water wars. So, and hopefully we can avert that. Hopefully it won't have to come to that. But in the event that it does, heads up. Heads up. Water filtration. I'm just going to breeze right on that. Water filtration obviously is important, not only for tap water, but if you're in an emergency situation. There's different ways you can do it. Of course, you can boil it just to kill bacteria. You can use sand and gravel method if you're out in the middle of nowhere to clean your water to the point where you know that it at least isn't going to make you sick. And these are the kind of things that you can look up online. But it's important to have like these kind of plans and strategies in the event that you're ever in that position, because that's kind of like where they're pushing everything right now. And so essentially empowerment. Empowerment, I cannot say enough about personal empowerment. We live in a society where we are kept in fear. And when you're kept in fear, you're always looking to other people for answers, and you're always wanting solutions from outside of you by the very people that have created the fear that's holding you hostage. And what I discovered with housing and what I'm discovering with water is that the only way to get where you need to go with this is to personally empower yourself and help empower other people, because no one of us can make this change. It's something that all of us have to be able to work together to do, and we all have to be pushing at the same time in different ways, not just legally, illegally. I had Hamrick shut my water off last week. The guy showed up outside. He had trouble turning the thing off. I told him, do you understand you're violating my civil rights? Nobody talks like this. Nobody wants to admit, nobody wants to talk about it should be constitutional, right? So this is the kind of thing I'm going to be working on with a lot of activists is to push for this to be done. Because empowerment is the single most important factor in freeing our water is empowerment. If we don't do this, what is being done in the Great Lakes and what's being done with rainwater collection being illegal and stuff like that is going to happen all over the U.S. And it looks to me like they're using Detroit as kind of a test case for things that happen across the United States. For instance, emergency management. Emergency management was instituted And now it's being done in cities all across the U.S. because they were successful here. We voted it out, they brought it back anyways. They've essentially suspended our Constitution in the state of Michigan. So I think it's really important that we keep all of these things in mind every day when we are dealing with and trying to ensure that we have the water, the clean water that we need. Because we can't, it seems like it's an infinite resource, and it is to the extent that we have the oceans and we can, filter the stuff out from the oceans. But where we're at right now, this is never going to be like this again, so we have to protect it. Any questions? They shut off my water, and what I did immediately was post it online. I posted up a video, I posted up pics, and then of course people started saying, oh my God, take that down, people can't know that you don't have any water. And I said, no, that's exactly the reason why I'm telling people that I don't have any water, is because people need to know. So of course, immediately, someone stepped in, and they did loan me the money to be able to get my water turned back on, and I'm put on a payment plan, but as you know, there is no water affordability in the city of Detroit. It should be based on income, it is not. And that's one of the things that I would like to ask people to push for. If you do not believe that water should be free, you should at least believe that it should be upon a person's ability to pay. And that they shouldn't be denied water simply because they only make $100 a week or whatever that looks like. And that people who are at the top, and especially the top 1%, who are Oakland County and the people that actually benefit from our water system and don't pay the same kind of fees that we do, should be paying more than we are. And these are the things that we have to push for ourselves. Pardon? Yeah. So any other questions?
Yeah, so as far as empowerment and talking to other groups, I mean, there's so many things here that are way beyond Detroit. We all need basic water rights. We need these Great Lakes, for instance, this whole Great Lakes region. We need to clean that up, and we're working to clean it up where I live, but I don't live in Detroit. And so I'm wondering if you do have a network of groups that are working with the water rights here or the watersheds here.
People's Water Board.
People's Water Board?
Hydrate Detroit. We the People. I can think of a few.
Thank you.
There's a lot. Most activist groups are pushing for water rights, and it's actually kind of been a cohesive element in uniting all these groups, because everybody knows that it should be a human right. And as far as, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Other networks.
Yeah, are there networks uniting these groups that we can join?
When it comes to empowerment, I really believe that it has to be, yes, it has to be a group effort, but it also has to be an individual thing. Because you can get a group of people in the same room, and when you're asking for consensus, if just one person does not agree, the idea is thrown out completely. So what I advocate is, if you're working with a group and they want to push forward on something and they're willing to, that's great. But if you have an idea that you want to do separate from that group, don't think that you can't do it or you shouldn't do it just because you're doing it.
No, I'm thinking, how can we empower each other as a network?
Absolutely.
In our individual groups and our individual efforts?
Absolutely.
To all help push it through.
So you have to be reaching for all these things at the same time. And if we're doing that, instead of just the course of action of pushing for water affordability or pushing for legalities in the system, that's just one course of action. And like I said, you cannot expect people who don't have a conscience that are at the top to give you what it is you're looking for, because all they're seeing is dollar signs, and that's all they're going to see. Water, it should be available for everyone at any point in time that they need it, and as much of it as they need to clean, to stay healthy, to stay hydrated.
If they were using the proper economics, they would see that if you support people at their basic needs, then we would all be richer.
And nature echoes this. You plant one seed, the flower's going to give you 50 seeds. You plant those 50 seeds, you're going to get whatever that math is. But so they're operating on a fear-based system, and what we need to do is to show them and prove to them that natural law, which obviously we can know is in effect, is the most important approach when it comes to these kind of things. because there is a higher choice that will benefit everyone, and it doesn't have to come down to competition, scarcity, and death.
Are you affiliated with any organization or speaking on behalf of your
I'm affiliated with a lot of different groups. I don't subscribe to any one group because it binds me to their consensus.
I agree.
And as a representative of their group, if I then want to go do something on my own, then they consider that an affront on their group, or that, you know what I'm saying, it would put focus on their group that they don't want, or whatever the case may be. And that's your personal choice, if you want to be part of a group, if you want to do that individually, and if you ever have ideas that are outside of that box, you know, just make sure that you're letting people know, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and you might not agree with it, but I feel like I have to go forward with this anyways because it's that important. Even if you don't, if you're not willing to go there, I'm willing to go there, because this is the thing. Nobody supported me in taking over my house. It was not until I went into my house, I cleaned out my house, and I started telling people I took this house. Then people got the bravery and the courage to come forward and help me with that because they saw me do it initially. And sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes it takes that one person to say, I don't give a fuck. I know what's right. I'm going to stand for what's right. I'm not going to apologize for what I'm doing. And if you're with me, you're with me. But if you're not, I don't care, because this is what I have to do.
Feeling the Holy Ghost, sister.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate you. I know I ran over. I appreciate it. This is such a huge thing, and it's so important.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just want to say I appreciate you coming out today. Due to you just speaking on perpetrators, and I think sometimes just that is enough. I think too much that I go to things, people are affiliated, like you're saying, we're all just trying to get by.
Right.
And I think more people that are just normal, working class, poor people that just say, hey, I'm just trying to do what's right and us come together. So I do have a couple of questions. I do have one last question. Is if we're not affiliated with all these different groups and we recognize we all have this human right, how do you think all us young folk are going to come together to smash this or change this situation? What do you think it's going to take?
People don't typically come together until there's catastrophe that forces them out of their comfort zone. And that's really all I can say about it. Our history has shown that that's what it takes for the majority of people to stop the things that they're doing and make changes, is they can't be, they're discomfort, and that's why they come out. The first time how I became an activist was they shut my gas off and my electric on a Friday, the day before a snowstorm at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had a 3-month-old baby in the house. And that weekend, I became an activist. It wasn't until I was in a situation where the life of my child was threatened that it was serious enough for me to say, I'm going to devote my life to this now. And that's why I do what I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
I think it becomes like a 100th monkey effect too. If we're all doing it and passionate, then it's just an obvious right.
First they're crazy,
We're all upset.
and they put the finger at you, and then you fight, and then you win.
Yes.